I hope that you're interested in learning about strategies that can empower you through any challenge. If you're facing a challenge in the criminal justice system, I tell the stories that really got me through a 45-year prison sentence. My name is Michael Santos. I'm the founder of Prison Professors. It's a nonprofit that we created with hopes of opening more mechanisms for people to work toward earning freedom. And this is not something that started this morning. I started this very early in my own journey of going through a lengthy prison sentence. And today I'm going to talk with you about one of the components or the tools that I created to help me with that. And that tool is called Prison, my 8,344th day. I'm going to talk a little bit about that book, why I wrote that book, and how I believe that book can help anybody who is facing a challenge. The reality is that the lessons that got me through that journey, I learned from leaders. Those leaders include Nelson Mandela, and of course, anyone can learn from Nelson Mandela. You don't have to be going into a South African prison to learn from him. They include lessons from Viktor Frankl, an individual who lost his family during the horrors of the Holocaust. You don't have to be going through the Holocaust or all of the challenges of a Nazi concentration camp to learn from the wisdom of Viktor Frankl. In fact, he wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning that talked about, regardless of what challenges a person faces, as long as you could find meaning in your life, you can have the power to push forward. It can empower you to feel stronger. And I certainly learned that from leaders. So the leader that inspired me to write this particular book, Prison, my 8,344th day, was a journalist by the name of Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Now, I got inspired by Solzhenitsyn when I was still in the penitentiary, and I got an opportunity to read the Gulag Archipelago, which is a very big book. It's thousands, I think it's more than 2,000 pages, and it just tells the story of Siberia and life in that very harsh prison environment of Russia. I think it was, if I remember right, this has been decades since I read that. I think it was during Stalin, or it could have been Lenin's Russia, that they incarcerated people in these very harsh conditions for political reasons, not even for committing crimes. And Solzhenitsyn was a journalist who wrote about the Siberian prison experience. And because he wrote about the prison experience, he became a target, and they locked him in prison. And he became a very prolific author who inspired me. And at one point, I wanted to write my own Gulag Archipelago because I'd served so much time in prison, in high security penitentiaries, in medium security prisons, in low security prisons, and even in minimum security camps. I wanted to write a version of the American prison experience for our audience. And I got inspired by him, so I started reaching out to publishers, and I actually wrote probably a 20,000 word sample of what I would write. And they told me, we'd love to publish some of your work, but nobody's going to want to read 2,000 pages about prisons. So I had to shift my focus, and that shift is what led to one of my earlier books called Inside: Life Behind Bars in America. And I believe I wrote that book. I was at the Florence Federal Prison Camp when I wrote that book. I believe it was 2005 or so. So I'd already been in prison for 17 or 18 years. And St. Martin's Press published the book, and it was a good experience. But things started to really open up. I got married by that time. Carol was really deep in my life, and she was managing my website. And I had already written Earning Freedom a few years later, Conquering a 45-year prison term. And I realized the books that I had written in the past, they tell this big story of serving decades in prison. But in all reality, most people don't serve that length of time. And most people struggle not to get through 20 years, but to get through a single day. And Solzhenitsyn wrote another book besides the Gulag Archipelago called A Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich. And I remember reading that book and thinking, this is an interesting story, because it starts from the moment this character, and it's a fictional book, but the moment Ivan Denisovich opens his eyes and wakes up, and he talks about in a story narrative format, everything that he's doing throughout the day, from the time he gets out of bed, has breakfast, puts on his work boots, trudges through the snow, and gets to his work camp, performs his labor, and spends the day there drinking coffee, the joy he feels in eating a cinnamon donut that somebody smuggled in. I might be confusing some of the other books that I read during my journey, but what is certain about a day in the life of Ivan Denisovich is it's one day. And I thought, I had been asked questions by so many people after I'd been in for 23 years, how do you get through it? How do you do so much time and still stay motivated and driven and confident in what you're doing? That was the goal of writing Prison, My 8,344th Day. And I believe the original title was Prison, My 8,344th Day, a typical day in an ongoing journey, because I still had a few years to serve. I'd done 23. I didn't know if I was going to get out in 24 years, 25 years, or 26 years, but I knew I would be out no longer than 26 years. 25 years? 26 years. I think I did 26 years. I don't remember anymore. I think it was 26 years. So I knew I was going to get out at some point, and I wanted to share what strategy got me through. So from the moment my eyes opened, I'm looking at my watch, and you'll read that I used to train myself to get up very early in the morning. I found it to be therapeutic and helpful to sleep while others were awake, and to be awake when others were asleep. I found it therapeutic to focus on what skills I could develop in that environment, rather than focus on all of the oppression that you feel while you're going through prison and separating from the people you love and the people who love you. You know, in the United States, if you've read any of my work, you know I frequently talk about some of the challenges. You know, in the United States, we point fingers at other nations for violating human rights. But I would always say, if you were going to ask any person, what is a human right? Some people might, they might be, be curious. I don't know how to answer that. But I think that if you spell it out, a lot of people would say that a human right is the right to communicate. It's the right to connect with other human beings. That is a fundamental human right. It is the right to improve yourself and develop skills that will help you live a more meaningful, relevant life. But of course, in the United States, we violate those human rights for millions of people every single day. I want to show people who are living in that kind of environment, which can feel oppressive, how do you empower yourself? How do you develop strength? And the lessons that I learned from leaders helped me, and I'm very confident they can help anybody. And the way that you have to do it is you have to live as if you are the CEO of your life. I can't control external forces. I can't control the past, that I broke the law and a judge sentenced me to a long-term in prison. I can't control that prison administrators determine where they want to hold me, or what they want to serve me to eat, or how frequently they will allow me to spend with the people I care about. I can't do that. But what I can do is prepare myself to emerge successfully with my dignity intact. And in Prison, my 8,344th Day, I describe the strategies that got me through. And this is a self-directed workbook. Earning Freedom, Conquering a 45-Year Prison Sentence, which is the first book I recommend people reading, is different because it focuses on the pathway to a better life. It focuses on how do you sustain a long-term vision if you're doing multiple years or multiple decades in crisis. How do you stay focused? Prison 8,344th Day is how do I get through a single day? And the way that you do it is you always focus on developing more skills that align with what you want to become on the other side of the journey. I knew that I wanted to advocate for change. I wanted to advocate for people to be able to earn freedom through merit. I wanted to see reforms that would incentivize a pursuit of excellence. I wanted to see a pathway that we would create policies that would end intergenerational cycles of recidivism. But in order to do that, I needed to build a coalition. And that coalition would include people going into the system. It would include people who work in the system. It would include policymakers. It would include academics. It would include students. And all of that was a vision I had when I was going through multiple decades in prison. I needed to develop, to be the CEO of my life, I needed to have that vision. I needed to develop my tools, tactics, and resources that would help me bring that vision along, advance that vision. Well, when I'm talking about prison, my 8,344th day, it is one of those tools. It is a tool that I use to try and inspire other people in jail and prison to focus on what can I do, or what can, not me personally, what can the reader do, regardless of what the system is doing, to start empowering yourself, to start building, to start preparing, build and build and build and build, and understand every single decision comes with an opportunity cost. So the more deliberate we are, the more we think about the future, the stronger we become in being able to architect a future that will lead us to the world that we want to live in. And so Prison My 8,344th Day is a self-directed workbook with numerous exercises. Every section concludes with a series of exercises where I'm challenging people to learn. Regardless of what the system does, you can always learn to develop writing skills. You can always learn to develop a stronger, more robust vocabulary. You can always learn how to build a self-directed work ethic. You can always learn how to be the CEO of your life. And this is the book that I wrote with hopes of helping you learn why every day is important. In prison, there's a saying that said every day feels like a year and every year feels like a day. You get through a day, you say, oh, how am I gonna get through it? It's a whole, day and it feels like a year. But at the end of the year, you look back and you say, God, it went by so fast. Well, Pink Floyd sang a song that said, 10 years can go by and you wonder, how did you get here? Don't let that happen to you. If you're living in a crisis or you're going through a challenge, make sure that you are making intentional decisions that will help you emerge with your dignity intact and with opportunities to thrive. You'll learn that in all of our books, but you'll learn how to get through a single day in prison, my 8,344th day. I am Michael Santos. I am the founder of Prison Professors Charitable Corporation. We are a nonprofit that really strives to reform the system, to bring federal work release programs, to bring more incentives for people who are pursuing excellence, to really just transform America's prison system and end intergenerational cycles of recidivism. We hope that you will become a part of the movement of the Prison Professors community by following us on social and sharing us with anybody you know who may have an interest in this subject matter. My name is Michael Santos. I believe in you. Be cool.